"Move along, old man. You're making our customers nervous." The words hit Kevin Russell like a slap across his weathered face. He looked up from his untouched scrambled eggs, his arthritis-gnarled fingers still wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. The manager, some kid named Brad with a clipboard and a power complex, towered over him like a courthouse judge delivering a verdict. Around the diner, conversations died faster than summer flies. Forks froze mid-bite. Even the ancient jukebox seemed to hold its breath. Kevin's eyes swept the room. At the center booth, for men in matching polo shirts smirked like hyenas who'd cornered wounded prey. One of them, a stocky guy with a beer gut that announced his dedication to weekend golf, nudged his buddy and whispered loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Bet he drew that tattoo himself with a ballpoint pen." The tattoo. Always the damn tattoo. Frank glanced down at his left wrist, where a faded dagger pierced through an anchor, ink that looked like it had been applied by a drunk sailor in a back-alley parlor. Which, ironically, wasn't far from the truth. Except that particular drunk sailor had been the best combat medic in Southeast Asia, and the ink had been earned in blood, not bought with pocket change. But these soft-bellied weekend warriors didn't know that. To them, Kevin was just another broken-down old man playing dress-up with military mythology. "Sir." Brad's voice carried the synthetic patience of someone who'd never been told no by anyone scarier than his mother. "The patio's lovely this morning. Fresh air, you know." Kevin nodded, not in agreement, but in recognition. He'd fought this battle before, in a dozen different diners, in 100 different ways. Some wars you win with bullets, others, you lose with dignity. He gathered his cane and stood, his prosthetic leg announcing each movement with a metallic whisper that sounded like secrets being spilled. The golf shirt brigade watched him like vultures circling roadkill, their eyes following every painful step toward the door. "If that fossil's really a seal," the beer gut champion announced to his audience, "then I must be Batman." The table erupted in laughter that echoed off the vinyl booths like gunshots in a canyon. That's when the first tear fell. Not a sob, not a breakdown, just a single drop of salt water that carried 60 years of being invisible, of being forgotten, of being the punchline to jokes told by men who'd never heard a shot fired in anger. Kevin pushed through the glass door into the November chill, where the wind cut through his threadbare jacket like criticism through false pride. He settled at a wobbly patio table, his breakfast growing colder than his reception inside. Through the window, he could see the golf shirt squad high-fiving like they'd just won the Super Bowl. Then the bell above the door chimed, and everything changed. The young man who entered moved like liquid steel, fluid, purposeful, dangerous in the way that predators are dangerous. Military haircut sharp enough to cut glass, shoulders that could carry the weight of the world, eyes that missed nothing and forgave less. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez scanned the diner with the methodical precision of someone trained to spot threats in crowds. His gaze swept past the laughing golfers, past the uncomfortable waitress, past the manager with his clipboard crown. Then he saw the empty booth in the corner, the one where someone had obviously been sitting. His eyes tracked to the window, where an old man sat hunched over a plate of cold eggs, and Marcus saw it, that faded tattoo, barely visible beneath a coat sleeve that had seen better decades. Time stopped. The laughter died. Even the coffee machine seemed to pause mid-gurgle, because Marcus Rodriguez knew that tattoo, had studied it in classified briefings, had heard whispers about it in the halls of Quantico, had been told stories they swore you to secrecy about, of 8 men who went into hell and only one who walked out. Kevin Thompson, code name, Ghost 7, the man who'd saved 17 Marines during Operation Silent Thunder, who'd coordinated extractions under enemy fire with nothing but hand signals and pure grit, who'd carried wounded soldiers through minefields while bleeding from shrapnel wounds that should have killed him. The legend they still taught about in Special Forces training, sitting alone on a diner patio because some civilian jackasses thought his service was a joke. Marcus walked outside with the measured pace of someone approaching hallowed ground. He stopped 3 feet from Kevin's table, came to attention, and delivered a salute so crisp it could have cut diamonds. "Sir, are you Kevin Russell, Ghost 7, 1st Reconnaissance Battalion?" Kevin looked up, confusion clouding eyes that had seen too much. His voice came out as a croak. "Who's asking?" "Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, Force Recon." "Sir, I need to know, is that a G7 designation tattoo?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Kevin's hand trembled as he set down his fork. After a moment that lasted forever, he nodded. Marcus didn't lower his salute. His voice carried through the glass, reaching every ear in that diner. "Permission to sit with a living legend, sir." Inside, Brad the manager went pale as milk. The golf shirt squad looked like they'd been struck by lightning. The entire diner had become a museum, with everyone frozen in place, afraid to breathe. Kevin gestured to the empty chair. "Just an old man, son. Nothing legendary about cold eggs and colder shoulders." But Marcus remained standing. "Sir, with respect, you're the reason half my unit came home from Afghanistan. We still use your extraction protocols, your field medical techniques. That's enough," Frank whispered, but there was no authority in it. Just exhaustion. Marcus sat, finally, but his spine remained ramrod straight. "Sir, those men inside. They don't know what they're looking at." Kevin's laugh was bitter as black coffee. "They see exactly what I am. An old cripple taking up space. No, sir. They see a man who gave everything for his country and got nothing back but silence." Marcus leaned forward. "But I see the man who taught us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the mastery of it." Through the window, the golf shirt squad had gone quiet as graves. One of them, the beer gut comedian, stood abruptly and walked to the counter, leaving money without meeting anyone's eyes. But Kevin wasn't watching them. He was staring at this young warrior who spoke about classified operations like he'd lived them, who knew details that had never made it into any official report. "How do you know all this?" Kevin asked. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, black and white, edges worn soft with age. It showed 8 men in jungle fatigues, grinning at the camera like they owned the world. One of them had a fresh tattoo on his wrist. "My grandfather, sir. Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez. He was there for Operation Silent Thunder. Talked about you until the day he died. Said you were the reason he lived to meet my grandmother, to have kids, to give me this photo." Kevin stared at the image like he was seeing ghosts. Which, in a way, he was. "Miguel," he whispered. "Kid from El Paso. Always talked about his girl back home." "That's him, sir. And that girl became my grandmother." The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of history, of sacrifice, of connections that transcended time. Marcus stood and walked to the diner door. When he opened it, his voice carried like a command. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man sitting outside is Kevin Russell, Medal of Honor recipient, Purple Heart, Silver Star. He saved 17 Marines during classified operations in Vietnam. The protocols he developed are still used by special forces today." He paused, letting that sink in. "If anyone in here feels uncomfortable in the presence of an American hero," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to Arctic temperatures, "maybe you should examine why." The beer gut comedian grabbed his jacket and walked out without a word. His buddies followed like sheep, heads down, shame trailing behind them like exhaust fumes. Brad the manager disappeared into the kitchen like vapor. The waitress, a college girl named Jessica, grabbed a fresh pot of coffee and walked outside. She poured 2 steaming cups without asking, her hands shaking slightly. "My grandfather served in Korea," she said quietly. "He would have been honored to pour your coffee, sir." Kevin looked up at her, and for the first time in years, he smiled. Not the bitter twist of resignation he'd perfected, but something genuine, something that remembered what warmth felt like. "Thank you, miss. Your grandfather raised you right." As Jessica walked back inside, Marcus pulled out his phone. "Sir, would you mind if I took a photo? Not for social media or anything public. Just for my family. To show them I met the man Grandpa Miguel talked about." Kevin hesitated. A lifetime of staying invisible, of avoiding attention, of being forgotten on purpose. But something in Marcus's face, respect, gratitude, connection to the ghosts of brothers long gone, made him nod. The photo was simple. 2 soldiers separated by generations, sharing coffee and memory on a cold November morning. But when Marcus posted it that evening, with a caption that simply read, "Some heroes don't wear their medals. They carry their service in silence," something extraordinary happened. Within hours, the image had been shared thousands of times. Comments poured in from veterans, from family members, from strangers who recognized something authentic in that weathered face. My dad talked about Ghost 7. I served under officers who knew this man. My brother came home because of protocols this hero developed. By morning, Kevin Russell was no longer invisible. News crews arrived by Tuesday. The mayor's office called. The VA reached out with offers of assistance. Letters began arriving, hundreds of them, from grateful families, from active duty soldiers, from a nation that had forgotten how to say thank you. Kevin didn't know what to do with the attention. For 60 years, he'd perfected the art of being overlooked. Now, suddenly, everyone wanted to see him. The irony wasn't lost on him. For decades, he'd sat in that same diner, at that same table, ordering the same meal, and nobody cared. Now they wanted interviews, speeches, ceremonies. But the real change came quietly, in small moments that meant everything. Kids started waving when he walked down Main Street. The auto shop where he'd worked for 20 years, barely scraping by, suddenly had customers lined up. Veterans began stopping him to shake his hand, to share their own stories, to say the words he'd never heard. Thank you for your service. The golf shirt squad never came back to the diner. 3 months later, the city council voted unanimously to rename the street where Kevin lived. The new sign read, Heroes Way, with a small plaque underneath, in honor of those who serve in silence. Kevin stood at the dedication ceremony, uncomfortable in a borrowed suit, watching politicians make speeches about sacrifice and service. The irony was sharp enough to cut. The same community that had ignored him for decades was now celebrating him for the cameras. But then Marcus stepped to the podium, and the tone changed. Kevin Russell never asked for recognition, the young sergeant said. He never demanded respect. He never wore his service like a badge or his sacrifice like a crown. He just did the job and lived quiet after. Marcus paused, looking directly at Kevin. But quiet doesn't mean forgotten. And service doesn't end just because the uniform comes off. This man has been serving his community for 60 years, fixing cars, helping neighbors, being the kind of citizen that makes America worth defending. The applause was polite, respectful, but Kevin could see the truth in people's faces. They were clapping for an idea, not for him. They were celebrating a story, not a man. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the politicians moved on to their next photo opportunity, Marcus approached. How do you feel, sir? Kevin was quiet for a long moment, watching families pack up their folding chairs, kids running between the adults with small American flags clutched in their fists. Grateful, he said finally, and a little sad. Sad, sir. Frank smiled, but it was complicated. Part joy, part sorrow, part something that couldn't be named. Took me 60 years to learn that being seen isn't the same as being known, and being celebrated isn't the same as being understood. Marcus nodded, understanding passing between them like a shared secret. But it's a start, sir. Yeah, Frank agreed, watching a little girl wave her flag at him from across the street. It's a start. The diner still serves the Veterans Special every Sunday. Kevin still sits at the same table, though now it's marked with a small plaque that tourists like to photograph. The morning crowd treats him with the careful reverence reserved for living monuments. But sometimes, in quiet moments between the handshakes and the thank yous, Kevin misses the invisibility. Not the loneliness, not the disrespect, but the simple honesty of being nobody special. Because heroes, he'd learned, are just people who did what needed doing when nobody was watching. The watching, that part came later, and it changed everything, even when you wished it wouldn't. On his gravestone, when the time comes, they'll probably engrave his medals, his service record, his moment of viral fame. But Kevin would prefer something simpler, something true. He served. He lived quiet. He was seen. Sometimes, that's hero enough. But if you asked Kevin Russell what he'd learned in 85 years on this earth, he'd tell you this. A man's worth isn't measured by the noise he makes or the attention he gets. It's measured by what he does when nobody's watching, when the cameras are off, when there's no medal waiting at the end. I didn't serve my country for parades or thank yous. I served because some things are bigger than yourself, bigger than your comfort, your safety, your need to be seen. Freedom isn't free, and somebody's got to pay the bill. Might as well be men who understand the cost. The real honor isn't in the recognition. It's in knowing you stood when others couldn't, carried when others wouldn't, and came home with fewer brothers than you started with, but more purpose than you knew existed. Every morning I wake up is borrowed time, borrowed from better men who didn't make it home. So I live for them, work for them, serve this community for them. Not because I'm a hero, but because they were. And if that makes me invisible for 60 years, so be it. A man doesn't need the world to see him to know who he is. The mirror tells the truth. Your conscience keeps the score. And when your time comes, it's not about how many people knew your name. It's about whether you kept faith with the man you promised to be when you first put on the uniform. That's what serving means. That's what honor costs. And I'd pay it again every damn day, because that's what men do. Sometimes, that's all the speech a hero needs. If this message has touched your heart, don't miss another breakthrough video. Hit subscribe now.